My first visitor is a really fascinating fellow, dude. He is the host and star of a very popular car-related show on the Discovery Channel. Richard Rawlings has arrived. In order to somewhat match Richard's Mustang, we also chose a GT performance. Steering wheel. Imagine a crowded courtroom in Dallas. The air was heavy with quiet and flashing cameras. Richard Rawlings, the face of Fast and Loud and the self-described king of cars, is positioned at the middle, music. He transformed metal wrecks into multi-million-dollar narratives for years as the untouchable empire builder. This is the question that nobody anticipated, though. When the picture eventually cracks in front of everyone, what will happen? Because the story changed as soon as the judge music started talking. The self-assurance diminished. Music, the mask fell off. In a matter of seconds, he lost control of the Gas Monkey Garage mythology. Music. He is Gas Monkey Garage's Richard Rawlings. The untold tale, swift and noisy. You must comprehend how high Richard Rawlings' music rose in order to comprehend how far he fell. When Richard first entered that dusty old garage on a quiet street, the Dallas sun was already blazing hot. He stared at rotting frames and broken windshields. Music, as if they were hidden gems. It was garbage music to everyone else. He saw it as the beginning of a kingdom. Gas Monkey Garage would be the name of that kingdom. Music. And if you watched cable TV as a child, you recall the fast-paced, loud show that made it famous. With his easy Texas assurance, Richard leaned over engines. Phones are ringing non-stop. His team is working really hard to complete builds prior to the music deadline. Loud rock tunes, big checks and smoky burnouts. The American dream was what it was. Accelerated to 100 miles per hour. Recorded in high HD. And broadcast directly into homes all over the nation. Richard, who was born in 1969, had been flipping automobiles long before any TV crew appeared. Before the concert, music even began. He said he had sold thousands of cars, enough to start a restaurant, bar, or live music venue. He was constructing a small empire that smelled like cold beer, barbecue smoke, and motor oil. When Fast and Loud debuted on Discovery in 2012, the music industry took off. Millions of people watched each episode of the show for 8 years in a row. It turned, become one of Discovery's most popular car series ever. And Richard became well known. His face was familiar to even non-automobile enthusiasts. Music, they were familiar with his beard, sunglasses, gaudy clothing, and the way he would light a cigar after closing a deal, as if he had just won the globe. He performed the role flawlessly. He drove vintage music Mustangs to meetings. He smiled as if he dared anyone to dispute his claim to be the king of automobiles. To be honest, no one could. Gas Monkey Garage became a household name. His Instagram was loaded with packed car shows, cheering crowds, and private jets. Gas Monkey Beer was released. Merchandise featuring gas monkeys flew off shelves. He and Dodge were partners. He looked like a rock music star when he arrived at SEMA. Okay, so here we are at SEMA 2024 in real time. He became the face of the contemporary American car flipping industry, and we're partnering with our friends at System X. He sold a dream with his music. He persuaded America that everyone could live like this if they put in enough effort, hustled music quickly, and had confidence in themselves, flip vehicles, drink beer, become wealthy, and become well-known. Millions of people purchased it. However, this is what you were never shown by the cameras. His team put in many hours behind the scenes. Deadlines that were not included in the final version. At 3 in the morning, the pressure cooker construction was completed. Music. The M just to get to the next episode. And something else was starting to deteriorate beneath all the swagger and high fives. Music. Because there was more to the story than what you saw on television. That's the gloomy part of music. Richard Rawlings, The Secret, the shield of Discovery Channel, abruptly vanished in 2020 when Fast and Loud eventually came to an end. And in the absence of that brilliance, it was impossible to ignore the music fissures in Richard's kingdom. Gas Monkey Bar and Grill closed its doors softly. The brand's music buzz began to wane. Richard made an effort to keep the train going. He started a YouTube account for music. He continued to flip cars. He continued to speak loudly. However, something wasn't right. There was no energy. The sales didn't seem as significant. The weight of the structures varied. Music fans began doing something they had never done before for the first time in years. They began to inquire, how authentic was Fast and Loud? Were those barn finds staged, or were they truly fortunate findings? Did the cars meet the same level of quality under camera deadlines as music did under studio lighting? On car forums, whispers began to appear. Stories about unpaid bills, harsh business calls, dodgy snorts agreements, former employees leaving hints in the comment sections, receipts that didn't line up, consumers who music claimed they got burned. Small hairline fractures began to appear in the image of the unstoppable king of vehicles. The problem with hairline fractures is as follows. It's simple to ignore them until the entire situation breaks down. Then, in the spring of 2023, an unexpected event occurred. Somewhere in a quiet office, an IRS agent opened a file folder bearing Richard Rawlings' name. He most likely anticipated another standard audit, another well-known businessman, and another pile of tax write-offs and receipts to confirm. Rather, the music he discovered would set off one of the most startling FBI investigations in the history of reality TV. Because the lifestyle did not align with the figures. The restoration part cost lines appeared very tidy, flawless, and practiced. Then he noticed it. A selling of Mustangs. Richard's social media accounts had been showcasing a custom build, a vivid blue metallic music beast that has been driven to auto exhibitions. captured on camera by admirers and shared with captions boasting of a six-figure flip. However, that Mustang's VIN was missing. The music agent initially believed it to be a misprint. One number flipped, one letter off. It does occur. However, the machine returned the VIN when he entered it into federal databases. Not found anywhere in the United States. Not in any records. This was not a mistake made by a clerk. In theory, this vehicle was non-existent, and an entire empire was on the verge of collapse thanks to that one dazzling blue ghost of a Mustang. I thought, I got to try this out. I had a Mustang lying around then. The real story behind the vehicle. Investigators found worse music the deeper they dug. The IRS began communicating with customs officers, state motor agencies, and the Department of Transportation. Richard's transactions were compared to federal music records. Additionally, more inconsistencies emerged each time they tugged a thread. There were no records for cars that ought to have undergone mandatory emissions testing. There were no matching receipts for restoration items that were claimed off as business expenses. The documentation for international auctions involving gas monkey automobiles, music, was hazy. Overseas private collectors were paying enormous amounts of money for automobiles whose origins no one could confirm when music was traced back. Investigators began removing footage from Instagram reels, music from previous Fast and Loud episodes, and Richard's own YouTube channel. The numbers didn't match when they stopped frames, focused on VIN plates seen during shop visits, and matched them to official Texas Restoration music files. They repeatedly failed to match. The warrant then arrived. Federal agents entered the Gas Monkey garage on a muggy Dallas music morning, their expressions serious and their documentation serious. They shoved beyond dusty rims of music racks. They crossed floor tiles that were cracked. They passed old engine blocks and parts crates before heading to the back of the warehouse, where the staff, music, had a moniker for it. It was referred to as the cage. It appeared insignificant from the outside. It's just another storage space with stacks of carburetors, boxes with handwritten labels, and outdated panels. Music, easy to ignore, easy to pass. However, they discovered something that stopped them in their tracks behind a false wall. Music and a heavy, reinforced metal door with a keypad lock. It was a lab for forgeries. One of the most well-known garages in America is home to a whole, industrial-grade professional VN forgery business. There were stacks of blank VN plates, expensive laser etching equipment, and printers that could create registration music stickers so realistic that even experienced inspectors could be tricked. Folders, paperwork, ledgers, original VIN data retrieved from salvage yards, and notes outlining which fictitious identity would be applied to which music build, and which pristine classic name would be affixed to which dubious shell, were all arranged on a scratched metal music workbench. This wasn't careless. This was not an error in music. This was methodical. This was mobile identity theft. Inside the cage, cars with dubious pasts were being reincarnated. Automobiles with stolen histories, salvage frames, and shells destroyed by flooding. They entered as ghosts and emerged as shining, uncommon matching number classics music that were up for auction. According to reports, several VINs circled back to Texas under new identities after passing through 3 or 4 different music states. Additionally, former workers began conversing. One technician acknowledged that he was in